This video is sponsored by Chimera Clothing. The Javelins, or Pillars of Light, is the name given to giant missiles deployed by those who slither in the dark in many routes against Byleth and their allies in Fire Emblem Three Houses. In a DLC book from Abyss, which is all but stated to have been written by a member of those who slither in the dark, it said the weapons were built by their ancient civilization to fight the goddess Sothis and her children, under the fear their bloodshed would make the progenitor god intervene. And while they did manage to wipe out a few Nabatean cities, the Agarthans were forced to retreat underground once Sothis retaliated, vowing revenge against her and her kin. This video focuses on the following: how the Javelins of Light are used in the story, and how they function as plot devices. Then it will have a brief breakdown of what purpose they serve in each route they're in, and finally, my personal opinion and critique of how the story uses them to push it along. Before this video gets started though, a quick message from the sponsor of today's video. Chimera Clothing offers quality product and a good price, and it makes it a policy to vet their suppliers so as to ensure fair and ethical production of their goods. I decided to try to cut a promo myself just to show how they would look in real life. And if you order online but you aren't satisfied, they offer a full refund within 30 days of receipt. The company is open to feedback and to answer general questions about their products, so if you have any queries, feel free to ask on their website before ordering. Use code FARGAST for 10% off upon your order. How are the Javelins of Light used in the story? I think Silver Snow is a good way to start this discussion. In that route, the Javelins first appear in Chapter 17 during the Fort Merceus infiltration mission, which ends with the Death Knight luring Byleth and their army out of the fort before two missiles obliterate the area. The crew ends up predictably startled by the whole event, but quickly brush it away, for the sake of planning their upcoming move against the Empire. A few chapters later, Edelgard is defeated, and the Light Pillars are mentioned soon after in Hubert's letter to the party, detailing what happened in Fort Merceus was the Slitherers doing, how they needed to be stopped, and where their hideout is. Come the next chapter, and Byleth and company find Shambhala, the Slitherers' underground base. Talus is surprised, activates some electric turrets, considers destroying Shambhala just to win, and, after being defeated, tries doing just that with the missiles, using no less than 5 before getting crushed by some debris. By the end, he accomplishes two things: destroying his base and wounding Rhea enough to have her go berserk in the final chapter and be the final boss. The next story that gives the Javelins much spotlight is in Verdant Wind, and despite sharing many story beats with Silver Snow, it does more with them. For example, in Chapter 18, while the outcome of Claude's plan to capture Fort Merceus is the same as with the church route, he quickly begins to wonder about the missiles, namely, who could be behind the attack and their overall practicality. The pillars are then briefly forgotten. For a bit. Edelgard is eventually killed. Hubert delivers a letter disclosing the Slitherers' location and headquarters, and when the gang finally rescues Rhea, Claude takes the chance to tell her about the missiles so she can spill the beans about who are those who slither in the dark, and after coming back to Garreg Mach, this exchange happens.
Those Javelins of Light, they were trying to use it to kill us at Fort Merceus, right? But then why not drop it on Garreg Mach? They must have known for a while that we were here.
It is not that they chose to refrain, but rather that they were unable to do so.
Rhea, how are you feeling?
I am well enough. I cannot afford to rest while Fodlan is in danger.
What do you mean when you say they couldn't drop a Javelin of Light here?
Once, a very long time ago, a massive ball of light fell upon this monastery. However, that light mysteriously changed course in mid-air and landed in Aelel instead. The Holy Tomb is not only the location of the progenitor god's eternal slumber, but also a sacred vessel for a power that repels evil.
Judith then suspects Hubert was likely able to track the location of the headquarters thanks to the Javelins of Light that hit Fort Merceus, with Leonie wondering if they refrain from using more because they fear of being discovered. Regardless, Claude assumes the pillars most likely have a catch, noting how the attack on Fort Merceus was very much planned in advance given the Death Knight's actions, and how no other missile had fallen since then. Afterwards, the rest of the plot plays like Silver Snow, with the difference being that Nemesis waking up to snatch the seat of Final Boss, while Rhea's wounds end up killing her after the story. Next we have Crimson Flower, where the Javelins appear only in Chapter 16 as the aftermath of the capture of Aryan Road. As a quick recap, Edelgard keeps the fort's attack a secret for the sake of the surprise factor and to ensure Cornelia, an Agarthan mole in the kingdom, ends up killed, as she wants to kill two birds with one stone by weakening both Fargus and the Slitherers. After Aryan Road's fall, Lord Arundel confronts Edelgard about Cornelia's death, doesn't buy any of her excuses, and leaves angry but not before leaving a warning.
I will be praying that the Empire will not become another Aryan Road.
Another Aryan Road? Just what do you mean?
Shortly after, Hubert arrives and delivers the news that an undisclosed amount of pillars of light blew up Aryan Road and the soldiers stationed on it, leading Edelgard to put two and two together and conclude the missiles were Arundel's payback for Cornelia's death. She also discusses Hubert's research on Aelel's lava problem and suspects it was likely their doing as well. Lastly, the team decides to keep the truth of the matter to themselves and frame the Church of Saros for the missile attack, with Hubert disclosing to everyone that, at the very least, the Javelins cannot be abused repeatedly. Finally, in Azure Moon, no pillars of light ever fall. One could say the most that happens related to it is that Lord Arundel, who's all but stated to be Talus, aka the man who controls the nukes, is killed before the Kingdom forces go past Gronder Field, but that's about it. Considering all we've seen so far, it's time to establish everything the game has told us about the Javelins. First, and this is kind of a given, they're weapons of mass destruction. Some can even turn a village into a bona fide, lethal lava land. Second, circumstantial evidence points out that they're linked to Arundel, and only he is able to control them. While this is never confirmed in-game, Azure Moon having Lord Arundel killed while also featuring no visible activity from the Javelins of Light, it's striking when you account that the other routes don't share the situation. Third, it's possible to deflect the Javelins by whatever Soth is placed in the Holy Tomb. Fourth, they're implied to be impractical to use. While multiple hints are given in the game about their handicaps, a proper answer never happens. Now, as a narrative device, as in the purpose the missiles are given during the story, the Javelins serve four key roles. In Verdant Wind and Silver Snow, they explain how Hubert locates their hideout so Claude and Byleth can go there. In Silver Snow, they wound Rhea enough to justify her dragon degeneration at the very last second, while in Verdant Wind, they keep her out of the picture when Nemesis and his undead army comes back and ensures her death once the story ends. In Crimson Flower, they showcase how Edelgard sees the Slitherers as threats, as in she isn't intimidated in the slightest despite the difference in technology. In Azure Moon itself, they have no role. In the greater picture, however, the lack of missiles hint that Talus and Arundel are one and the same, while suggesting he's the only Agarthan that can deploy them. This was an attempt at an objective analysis on what the Javelins of Light are and what function they served in the story as a narrative device. This next section is all my opinion and conclusive thoughts about how they serve as a narrative device, and if in my opinion, the game did a good job utilizing them. And your opinion on the Javelins are of course welcome in the comments too. I've given plenty of feedback of how the Javelins of Light are handled in Crimson Flower. There's an entire section dedicated to that in my Edelgard support science. But that criticism has less to do with the Javelins as a plot device and more to do with Crimson Flower's unwillingness to explore Edelgard's flaws any more than it tries. As a plot device itself, after we're all caught up on what their purpose is, I'm mixed on it. Its original purpose, to destroy the church, only for it to be deflected into Aelel, causing that area to become a destroyed land with lava flowing around, is really cool. It gives this mystical and ultra-powerful energy from the original humans before the goddess appeared. We begin knowing so little, just that Javelins of Light appeared and destroyed Aelel. It being crafted to be a punishment from the goddess is a sensible alibi for Rhea to hide the truth behind them.
If you believe the legends, this valley is evidence of the goddess's judgment, passed on humanity for its corruption. The forest that once covered the surrounding area was burnt to ash by a pillar of light that descended from the heavens. That legend fueled belief in a place of torment between our world and the next, where one's sins are purified in the cleansing flames.
This is a world full of magic and gods, so giant light beam death rays of a god would fit this world. Actually learning that they're man-made missiles that drop down from the sky made my hype for these weapons even higher. At the time of their introduction, we still didn't know where the missiles came from, just that the Death Knight knew about them coming, invoking intrigue for how the Death Knight would know all this, if Rhea actually deceived people with regards to what they really were, if these were the actual Javelins of Light, and so on. I am all for rule of cool when it comes to fantasy. Impractical armor, impossibly usable weapons, obscene power levels, and so on. And for me, ancient future technology is one of my favorite tropes in fantasy writing. Rule of cool doesn't have to explain the technical details. At least the rule of cool stuff that I personally enjoy. For me, it's one of those things that lets your imagination do the work. It doesn't matter if we don't know how these are made. The Javelins do this successfully. I am all for balls to the wall, crazy death missiles that definitely seem alien and totally technologically ahead of its time. But what the writers do to try to explain away their origins in an attempt to push the story forward is what turns me off from the coolness and the intrigue behind it. In Verdant Wind and Silver Snow, the Death Knight acts seemingly in his own interests, to warn Byleth for them to escape and survive the Javelins of Light. Since he's defending the fort, I would wager that Edelgard and Hubert also knew about the Javelin strike, and I would imagine they were expecting their enemies to die. Compare this to Crimson Flower, where the missile strike is completely unexpected, and Hubert is completely taken by surprise and shocked over the news. The major difference between Crimson Flower and Verdant Wind/Silver Snow is that Hubert is able to deduce the location of the sorcery. In Crimson Flower, the attack takes him completely by surprise, and the idea of tracing them back to Shambhala isn't on the table. But in the other two routes, it seems like he knew it was coming, which makes it more believable that in the route that he was prepared for them to strike, he would be able to trace them. This is a theory, since Three Houses does not explain this, but I would wager that Hubert wanted to use the planned missile strike as a way to trace the source of its attack so as to find the Agarthan hideout and deal with them after the war. And that's fine if that's what the real purpose was, or if it was something else, then I guess it was something else. But my question then is, how did Hubert even do this? We're just meant to believe that Hubert used magical math and science himself to deduce the location of their sorcery, but how he goes about this goes completely unexplained. And you may ask, so what, Gast? It's magic. But that's where I draw the line personally. There's no evidence that these missiles even start from the ground like an intercontinental ballistic missile. In both Fort Merceus and Agartha's missile scene, they literally materialize from the sky. I used to think the purple rings were a deliberate way to show how they lock onto a target, which could be a source of how Hubert was able to deduce their location, but in Shambhala, they appear within literal seconds until Rhea transforms and tries to stop them. So if they came from the heavens, how is Hubert able to deduce their location from Fort Merceus, which is so far away from Goneril, which is where Shambhala is located around? They are remotely launched from Shambhala, but that is legitimately all we know. How did they appear in Merceus? Did they get teleported and just dropped down from there? I don't think Hubert, or anyone else, should be capable of tracking ancient high-level magic like this. This is incredibly advanced ancient magic that nobody would have any experience dealing with. There's no track ICBM spell or gadget or magical equation that we know of that allows Hubert to do this. If he needed to deduce the location of Shambhala and needed to use the missiles to track their location, it's not like he has plants or informants in Shambhala from what we know. Otherwise, he wouldn't need to trace their location at all. Nobody knows where Shambhala is exactly. Seteth's investigation into those who slither in the dark eventually ran cold because they didn't know where they actually came from. I will grant some charitability to Hubert in Crimson Flower in one aspect, though. Hubert is unable to deduce the location in Crimson Flower, and is only able to assume that this is what happened to Aelel back in the old days. But even in CF, he is still able to deduce that they can't be used again so soon. How can he be simultaneously blindsided by a never-before-witnessed magical missile strike, then immediately after, legitimately within hours, calmly tell his allies that they can't be used again so soon thanks to his quote-unquote investigation? Does raise an eyebrow. Either Hubert is lying about this investigation, or he's lying to attempt to calm down his fearful allies, which, given that easing the worries of their comrades was the point of not telling the truth behind the strike, is fair enough, I guess, if that's what the intention was. At least in Verdant Wind and Silver Snow, Claude/Sethith are able to rationalize or come to some sort of plausible theory as to how those who slither in the dark can't just spam them whenever they please. I dislike the idea that we're supposed to believe Hubert is capable of doing anything with regards to the Javelins in all 3 routes they're a part of, when I can't help but wonder if it was just a way for them to progress the plot forward, or in the case of Verdant Wind and Silver Snow, push the plot forward to its final act. I think the story provides decent enough reasons for Arundel to not just use the rest of the missiles they have against the Empire after Rhea is defeated. In Crimson Flower, he and Edelgard do still want to continue their working relationship even after the war ends, so in that respect, we can at least say Arundel didn't use the Javelins because he still saw some utility in Edelgard as she reigned in a new era for the continent. That said, I do think that the writers needed to have more directly stated limitations behind these weapons. There is nothing in-game that explains what Hubert's deduction actually meant that doesn't rely on headcanon and theory crafting. The closest we get to a reasonable way of tracing the location is referring to the purple rings meant for targeting, but those don't even start from the ground. Bringing back what I said a few minutes earlier, Rule of Cool doesn't have to explain the technical details, at least the Rule of Cool stuff that I enjoy. Hubert deducing their location opens a can of worms about how these missiles actually work, raising questions that cannot be answered with any in-game evidence. Is a concrete answer necessary though? Well, to be absolutely clear, these aren't game-breaking or story immersion-breaking story issues. It gives Hubert undeserved plot powers for sure, but Hubert deducing their location in Verdant Wind and Silver Snow would be easier to swallow if more information was to be provided for us to infer about. Everything points to this being an impossible task at worst, and at best, possible, but requires theory crafting and headcanons, which is something I've started to grow not so fond of over my 3 Houses experience. I do think more care could have been placed for Hubert's actions late into these routes, though, since in the case of Silver Snow and Verdant Wind, getting to Shambhala and finishing the story completely hinges on Hubert's letter. The missiles are ridiculously cool, and the writing's handling of them after they launch is the only part I dislike about them. That will do it for today's video. And can you believe it? It was published 1 week after my last one. That is the sort of consistency I am continuing to hope for. This was a different, more grounded and serious video than my usual ones. It was more focused on the story rather than the characters, so if you do enjoy this type of content and would like to see more opinion videos on story stuff, then please let me know in the comments below. Even though YouTube removed the dislike bar and I can't get it back, your likes are still very important to the algorithm. So if you made it to the end and you're watching this right now, please leave a like and comment down below to help spread this video around. The channel is about 600 subscribers away from 91,000, and if you are new to the channel and haven't subscribed yet, please consider doing so. It will bring me closer to my years-long dream of getting 100,000 subscribers making Fire Emblem content. Finally, thank you to my wonderful patrons that you see on the screen right now who help support me every month. You're all a huge reason I'm able to do this as my job. Thanks for everything. Deuces.